Hey guys, and welcome back to another Mystery Monday video on my channel. Just quickly before we get into today's video, there is a few things that I would like to mention. One being that it is very windy outside right now and I do live in an extremely old house. So sometimes when a big gust of wind comes, you can hear the window panels shaking. And I'm not sure if you're going to be able to hear that in the video, but if you do hear something in the video, it is most likely that. Or they just started tearing up a room downstairs, and as of right now in this room you can't really hear much of anything and it's pretty quiet, and I'm hoping that it will remain that way throughout this video. But if you do hear something, it's most likely that or my dog, because he seems to be making a lot of noise throughout these videos. But I'm going to do my best to try and keep all of those things quiet, although I know you can hear my dog right now. But please bear with me through that because I really wasn't expecting for all of these things to happen as soon as I started filming this video, but I hope that it still works out. So anyways, let's get right into it. Siriboon, better known as Bung, was born on December 30th, 1997 in Thailand. She had an older sister whose nickname was either Pang or Pung. I couldn't verify that because it differed from site to site, but the two girls only had about 4 years of an age difference between them, and the two girls were very, very close. Bung was described as being a pretty quiet but very polite young woman, and once you got to know her, she was said to be very outgoing. She loved to make up dances with her friends, she loved singing, she was a huge Justin Bieber fan, she really enjoyed K-pop, and she really was very, very intelligent and bright. So much to the point that at the time of her disappearance, she was actually teaching herself the Korean alphabet. And she really, really loved school, not only because she was so intelligent, but also for the social aspect of it, so she rarely, if ever, missed a day. Bung's parents got a divorce when Bung was very, very young, and after this, her biological father really didn't have much to do with Bung or her older sister. But the two girls remained very close to their mother, Vanetta. While on vacation in Australia, Vanetta met a man by the name of Fred Pattison, and they immediately hit it off. They had a lot in common, including the fact that they were both really dedicated Buddhists, and they just really got along. Vanetta and Fred remained in constant contact even after Vanetta had returned back to Thailand, and they would eventually start to be in some kind of long-distance relationship. And soon after that, Fred actually moved to Thailand to be closer to Vanetta and the girls. And at this time, he started to become very, very close with both of Vanetta's daughters, and so much to the point that the girls actually started to call him Dad. The bond that Fred had created with Bung and her sister was extremely strong, and he played the dad role extremely well. He was really good at fathering these two girls, despite the fact that they weren't biologically his. June 2nd, 2011 started just like any other day in their family's home. Fred arrived home from work very early in the morning after he had finished his job where he worked overnight in a factory, and he arrived home just as the girls were getting up to get ready for school. So after he arrived home, he would go to bed, the girls would get up, they would have breakfast, they would get ready, and then they would go to school. That was just their everyday routine. Bung had egg rice soup like she did every single day for breakfast, and after that she put on her school uniform and just got herself organized to leave her house to head to school. Bung walked to school every single day. Since she had moved to Australia, she had walked the same route every single day, I believe to the exact same school every single day. And the walk was only 10 minutes, and usually this walk was very busy with other children who were walking in the same direction to go to the same school. Bung would usually walk to school with her best friend, but on this particular day it was raining quite hard, so her friend actually ended up getting a ride to school from her parents, meaning that Bung would be walking to school alone. 13-year-old Bung Siriboon left her house between 8:15 to 8:30 that morning, with her last words being a short goodbye to her mother. I'm just going to give you a brief summary of what Bung's walk to school looked like every single day so that you kind of get an idea of how long it would have taken her to get there and what exactly her walk would look like before I dive deeper into this case. Bung's walk, like I mentioned earlier, was pretty basic. Bung would walk down her street, which is Elsie Street, until the street turns into Albert Avenue, which is a busy intersection, but again, Bung would be used to crossing the intersection because she walked this route every day. After crossing Albert Avenue, she'd be on Harcourt Road, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and she would walk down this road before turning onto Monco Street, which leads straight into the back entrance of Bung's school. This walk is only about 1 kilometer and also would usually only take Bung about 10 minutes to complete. Also, like I mentioned earlier, usually Bung would be surrounded by other kids who were walking to school with her. But due to the fact that it was raining quite hard that day, majority of the kids got a ride home, meaning that Bung was pretty much the only kid walking to school that day. A neighbor said that they had spotted Bung walking down Elsie Street around 8:30 that morning after they had been alarmed by their dog that somebody was walking past their house. So they went to look and they seen Bung walking to school like she did every day. Now this neighbor knew Bung. They only lived a few houses down from her, so they did know that it was Bung when they saw her walking by. And the time that they said that they seen her walking by their house did line up with the family's timeline of when Bung had left her home. So this is the only confirmed sighting of Bung after she'd left her house that day. Someone had also later reported seeing Bung walking down Monaco Street at around 8:50 that morning. Now, if this was in fact Bung, then that means that her normally 10-minute walk took her 20 minutes that day. Now this sighting isn't confirmed, and there's no way to confirm this sighting, but how would her walk that would have normally taken her 10 minutes have taken her 20? And this sighting would also put her at the back gates of her school, meaning that something happened to her in a very, very short period of time. Because somehow Bung Siriboon disappeared on her very short 10-minute walk to school. Like I mentioned earlier, Bung really enjoyed school, and in fact, since she had moved to Australia, she had never missed a day of school. So when she didn't show up to school that day, teachers just assumed that she was sick and that she'd be in the next day, and they didn't call home. Because Bung's school that she was attending actually had a policy that said that the teachers didn't need to call home on the student's first absence, which this was for Bung. Around 4 p.m., a friend of Bung's had called the family home, and Fred had answered, and this friend said they were calling to inform Bung of something that they had going on the following day. And Fred had said to this friend, you know, why didn't you just tell Bung about that when you were at school with her, because it was such a short time before that they would have been at school together. And that is when this friend informed the family that Bung had not been at school that day. Bung's parents, of course, at this time were panicking, so they got into their car and they drove down to Bung's school. And when they arrived there, they were informed by the staff of the school that Bung had absolutely been absent that day. And again, the teachers hadn't called home because this was Bung's first absence, and that was not the school's policy to call home on the child's first absence. Being informed this, the couple left the school immediately and headed straight to the Knox Police Department. They arrived there around 4:20 p.m. and they informed the police that their daughter was missing. Now, the police at this time told them not to panic. They told them to go home and make sure that Bung was not hiding out at a friend's house, that she hadn't run away, that she wasn't staying with family, and to do all of these things to cover their bases to make sure that Bung actually was missing and she just wasn't pulling some kind of teenage skipping ordeal. Something that I should also mention here is that Bung did not have her cell phone on her. It was still inside of the family's home, but this wasn't too odd as Bung's school had a strict no cell phone policy, so normally when Bung would go to school, she would just leave her cell phone at home and then use it once she arrived home from school. Of course, when the family arrived home, they called absolutely everybody they knew. They even called friends of friends who people thought that maybe Bung could have possibly met. But unfortunately, nobody had heard from or had any idea where Bung had been that day. On June 3rd, 2011, Bung's parents would return back to the Knox Police Department, but this time they would be filing a missing persons report. Immediately after leaving the police department that day, Bung's family started putting up missing persons posters for Bung all over the entire area. And by that afternoon, pretty much the entire city and the surrounding areas knew about Bung's disappearance. And almost right off the bat, police started to get hundreds of tips of what could have possibly happened to Bung. At this time, Fred had decided to take some time off of work to focus on the search for Bung. And this leave would actually end up lasting a full month. And not surprisingly, Bung's family was so distraught after finding that she was missing that the whole entire family hadn't even eaten for a week. The family had been questioned about the days and weeks leading up to Bung's disappearance, but like I kind of mentioned briefly before, there was really nothing out of the ordinary. Bung was super happy and she was being, generally normal. There was nothing really out of the ordinary that struck anybody as odd. So they were able to rule out the fact that they didn't believe that Bung was a runaway. This next part of the case I found very odd, but Bung had 3 Facebook pages and a MySpace, all under fake names, and the MySpace page actually had her age as 27 years old. Investigators went all through Bung's social media, all through all of these accounts that she had under fake names, and they said that they were able to rule out that she hadn't been talking to any online predators or anything like that at the time of her disappearance. So they were able to rule out the fact that she was abducted by somebody that she had met online. But to me, it seems very odd for a 13-year-old girl to have multiple social media accounts under fake names. Although, I will say that if she was creeping on somebody that she had known, maybe she had a crush on a boy or something like that, then I guess that kind of makes sense as to why you would make so many fake accounts. But it did strike me as something that was very weird in this case. Now, Fred was actually the first suspect in this case, but I don't think that is odd in cases like this. I feel like that's really common, especially when a young girl goes missing. The stepfather is often looked at very closely by authorities, and they are usually the first suspect that comes to light. It's usually the family who's looked at first. But Fred was fine with this. He was really cooperative with the police, and he did absolutely everything he could to help the case. Fred and Vanetta were both investigated thoroughly by police, and their home, as well as the area surrounding their home, was searched very thoroughly by investigators, and eventually both of the parents were ruled out as suspects. And by June of 2011, Bung's case was considered an abduction. After the month was up and Fred had to return back to work where he would be working the night shifts, was really hard for Vanetta. She didn't like to be home alone at night. She didn't like to have to sit by herself and think about the fact that her daughter was out there somewhere missing, and this just was something that was really hard on her. So after this, she decided to move back to Thailand where she felt safe and she would be surrounded by friends and family in a place that was familiar to her and where she felt comfortable. Now, this at first confused me because I was wondering what happened to the older daughter. Well, it turns out that she remained living in Australia with Fred. And Fred and Vanetta do still remain married. They're still very close. They travel back and forth to visit one another. They're just doing the long distance thing because this was better in the long run for Vanetta's mental health. Investigators went door to door looking for Bung after her disappearance. They also really looked closely at anybody who was in the area at the time of her disappearance who seemed suspicious or who wasn't supposed to be in the area at that time. And they also pulled all of the CCTV footage from all of the shops and things in that area. But again, this just turned up nothing. Many people called in saying that they had eyewitness accounts of a girl who looked strikingly similar to Bung. One of these was of an Asian girl who was spotted in a brothel nearby, but this lead was investigated and it turned out that this girl wasn't Bung. There was also 2 potential sightings of Bung on the morning that she disappeared. The first one was of a young Asian girl fitting Bung's description, looking out the back of a white Ford Falcon driven by a Caucasian man between the ages of 50 to 60 with slicked back hair and tattoos. The next possible sighting was of a young girl fitting Bung's description sitting in the front seat of a station wagon. Now this station wagon had no rear seats, but they could have easily been removed or laid down. Again, it was a Caucasian man who had been seen driving this vehicle, and he was in between the ages of 30 to 40. He had light or no hair on his head, so it was either light colored or he was bald. He had sleeves on both of his arms as well as neck tattoos. So this description seems to describe Fred, so people either think that maybe this person thought that Fred was guilty or they had something out for Fred, so they called police and said that they had spotted a young girl fitting Bung's description in the vehicle with Fred, or they got their dates mixed up and they had seen Fred driving Bung to school on a day before this had happened. Bung's biological father, who lived in Thailand, was also contacted and investigated by police, and he was also cleared as a suspect. On June 21st, 2011, a 16-year-old Caucasian girl from a nearby suburb, I believe called Ringwood, called police to report that somebody had attempted to abduct her. She had been walking down the street when a man pulled up in a blue sedan and tried to convince her to get inside of his vehicle. And when she denied, he kind of drove past her and stopped on the road, and she continued to walk, but once she walked past his vehicle, he'd gotten out of the car and ran up behind her and grabbed her. Now, luckily, this girl fought the predator off and was able to get away and inform police of the incident. The girl described the man as being between the ages of 50 to 60. She said that he had gray hair and decaying teeth, and that she believed that he both looked and sounded Southern European. This abduction attempt took place about 10 blocks from where Bung was believed to have been abducted from, but many people didn't believe that these cases were connected. And the reason for this is because Bung was only 13, whereas this girl was 16. This girl was Caucasian, where Bung was from Thailand, so she was of Asian descent. And there was just many other things that made people not really think that these two abductions were related. On June 29th, 2011, a second girl came forward claiming that she had escaped an abduction attempt that took place just a few blocks away from where Bung had vanished. This girl, who was allegedly attempted to be abducted, was 11 years old and also of Asian descent. And this girl had actually known Bung because the girls lived very close to one another. She said that the abductor was an older man, he had gray hair, he was wearing a gray and red tracksuit, and he was wearing glasses and a surgical mask at the time that he attempted to abduct her. Because of this reported attempted abduction, police strongly believed that all three of these cases could have been related. And they really started to go with that. They started to really search for the men or the man who attempted to abduct these two girls, thinking that they could know where Bung was or they had something to do with Bung's disappearance. They spent a lot of time searching for them. They spent a lot of time researching things to do with this, and they exhausted a lot of resources looking to find the man who was running around this area trying to abduct young girls. But just 2 weeks after this report of the second attempted abduction came out, the 11-year-old came into police and told them that she had made up the entire thing. Now I'm just going to assume that she made up the entire thing maybe for attention. Maybe she saw that everybody was really giving Bung a lot of attention, so she decided that she needed to do something similar. I'm not really sure, but I'm sure that today, now that she's grown up, she probably really regrets that, because the investigators spent 2 whole weeks when they could have been searching for Bung, really exhausting their resources trying to find this man who was running around the area attempting to kidnap young girls. A special task force took on Bung's case in October of 2011. Now this task force was called Puma, and they hadn't been together since 2003. This task force included 12 very experienced detectives as well as 1 tactical intelligence officer. Now, this task force came out and said after the first 2 weeks of investigating the case that they had found absolutely nothing. But after the first month of investigating Bung's disappearance, they had received over 600 calls from the public with tips of where Bung was or what happened to her. In 2012, this task force came out and said that they believed that Bung was abducted by a man in the area. Now, they never came out with anything to back this up. Nobody really knows why they believe this or who they believe did it, but that is what they said. In August of 2014, a 24-year-old man came forward to police and told them that he had accidentally killed Bung. He said that he had run her over with his car and he panicked and then buried her body on a nearby reserve. Of course, this man was held, he was interrogated, and the reserve was extensively searched. But ultimately, the things that this man was saying just didn't line up with Bung's case. A lot of the facts that he was stating had happened, or the things that they were using to kind of confirm if this was real, he was just getting completely wrong. So after the reserve was searched and no sign of Bung was found there, this man was released, and it was determined that he was lying and making this all up for whatever reason. And in 2013, the Puma Task Force, for another reason that is unknown, just disassembled and stopped investigating Bung's case. 9 months after Bung's disappearance, Knox Police Department did receive an anonymous call, and whoever was calling remains anonymous to this day, and whatever was spoken about on this phone call is not been released to the public. But whatever information this caller gave to police did in fact help, and the police have been pleading with this person to call back ever since. But it is unknown if this person has ever called back, and again, it is unknown what information they had given police. Robert Knight, who had been living in the area near to where Bung had vanished from, and had been charged in the past for sexually assaulting 2 girls, was actually the main suspect in this case for quite some time, but police were able to rule him out, and I don't believe that he's a suspect anymore. Police began to look at another suspect in 2012, and they haven't come out with this person's name or why they are being considered a suspect, but Police said that this person is still under investigation and that they have not been able to clear this person as a suspect just yet. Also in 2014, a $1 million reward with immunity to being prosecuted is being offered for anybody who comes forward with information about Bung's case, but this reward has never been collected. Fred, Vanetta, and their older daughter all believe that Bung is out there somewhere, that she was abducted but she is still alive out there somewhere, and they are holding out hope that she can come home one day very soon. This case is still open and being investigated by police, and I strongly believe that this case will be solved. All police need is one person to come forward with the right information to lead them down the path of what exactly happened to Bung Siriboon on that day while she walked to school. My heart sincerely goes out to Bung Siriboon's family. I really hope that they can get some answers and close this case soon. I hope that Bung is out there and that she can return home to be safe with her family. And I really just hope that this case gets closed very, very soon. But guys, that brings us to the end of this video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!